Let's continue the conversation surrounding the Cincinnati Bearcats and Big 12 Media Days. Is 13th place too low? And what are the benefits of Evan Prater moving to wide receiver plus? I've got a question. Are the Bearcats built to win in the Big 12?
You are Locked On Bearcats, your daily podcast on the Cincinnati Bearcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks so much for making Locked On Bearcats your first listen of every day. It's free and available wherever you listen to podcasts, including if you watch us on YouTube. So don't forget to hit that subscribe button and follow us to get an alert every time that we drop a new episode. I'm Alex Frank, your host each and every day here on Locked On Bearcats, which is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It is Wednesday, July 19th, 45 days from now. The Bearcats will kick off the 2023 season against Eastern Kentucky, which that also means 50 days from now is NFL opening kickoff night when the Lions and the Chiefs play, which means we'll get to see Travis Kelce. But today, I'm joined by one of my favorite guests to have on this show. He was at Big 12 Media Days at AT&T Stadium in Dallas, Texas, and of course, he told me all about the great barbecue they had down there in the great state of Texas, and that is our good friend Neil Meyer from the Front Office News. Neil, it sounds like you had a pretty good experience down in Dallas at the Big 12 Media Days, and it sounds like that it was a significant event from what I heard from you on Twitter and your videos, and from what I heard from the other Bearcats beat reporters and broadcasters who were down there. It sounds like it was a pretty significant event.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a very well-ran event. There was a lot of good content. You heard a lot of great things. And it wasn't just a highly ran event. It was an event that was ran in one of the most beautiful venues in all of college football and all of sports exactly. And that was in AT&T Stadium down there in Dallas, Texas. So overall, it was a great experience. The food was great, as we mentioned. But overall, there was a lot of exciting content to come out of the Big 12 within the last week. And it's the Bearcats in themselves are drawing a lot of interest here as they make this transition to the Big 12 come this fall.
Yeah, I was going to ask you because I was thinking about this. What was how does the rest of the Big 12, from what you gathered at Media Days, Neil, how does the rest of the Big 12 feel about Cincinnati joining the conference?
Yeah, Cincinnati is joining not only the Big 12, but they're joining the Power 5 conference, and they are gaining a lot of momentum, and you heard it from other coaches this week at Big 12 Media Days. And some of those coaches were Mike Gundy from Oklahoma State, Chris Kleeman from Kansas State, Steve Sarkisian even mentioned it a little bit there from Texas. Sonny Dykes was really excited to get back there. Obviously, he has had his great battles with the University of Cincinnati throughout his time at SMU. Dave Aranda from Baylor was really excited. Overall, there's a lot of excitement about Cincinnati and these other three schools in BYU, UCF, and Houston set to join the Big 12 later this year.
Yeah, and I like how you mentioned Steve Sarkisian because obviously a big storyline surrounding Big 12 Media Days was the fact that Texas and Oklahoma are leaving after this year. The Bearcats will play Oklahoma. They may face Texas later on if they somehow make the Big 12 championship. And, of course, we'll see them, not that this is relevant to football, but we'll see them in basketball. But what really fascinates me, Neil, is the number of coaches you just mentioned who have said that they're excited for Cincinnati to join the conference. And you mentioned some pretty significant names. I mean, Mike Gundy, I believe from what I know, is the longest tenured coach in the Big 12. I mean, he's been there since, obviously 2007 when he famously proclaimed that he was a man in 40. So these are great endorsements that the Bearcats are getting. So besides that, give me your biggest takeaway from Media Days.
Yeah, I think the biggest takeaway from Media Days is there's two words you heard a lot down there. One about the University of Cincinnati, and that was the culture that they are building. And that was a phrase we heard a lot from Jawan Briggs, Dante Corleone. Coach Satterfield even said it himself. And then we heard it from guys like Deshaun Pace And Emory Jones even mentioned the culture that is being built at Cincinnati. But overall, within the Big 12, a word we heard in every press conference was the word parity. And that talks about how strong and how deep the Big 12 actually is. And Brett Yormark made some remarks on that comment that he called the Big 12 the deepest conference in all of college football. And I mean, you look back at it in the Big 12 in the last few years, the parity in that league, it's true. Like, these preseason ballots don't really mean that much because in the last 2 seasons, Baylor was projected to finish 7th or 8th, I believe, if I remember correctly, in 2021. They ended up winning the Big 12. Kansas State was projected to finish 7th or 8th last season in the Big 12 preseason polls. They went on to win the Big 12 this season. And then TCU was also projected to finish low too, and then they went on to play for a national championship this year. So the parity in this league, it's incredible. You've seen it all throughout recent years. Like, this team could be a 1-7 team heading into week 8 or week 9, and then they go and play a team like Texas, and it's not going to be an easy battle. Like, the team that's going to be at the bottom could go into any given game on any different time and beat that team who's the number 1 seed. And that's what makes the Big 12 so unique. I mean, yeah, everyone's going to be focused on Texas and Oklahoma because those were your top 2 seeds in the 2 of the top 3 seeds with Kansas State in the preseason polls. But overall, I mean, there's a lot of teams that could really shock some people here. And I mean, we're talking about Cincinnati right now. Cincinnati came in projected to finish 13th, but there's a lot of good teams within this Big 12, and there's going to be a lot of teams that take this league by storm.
If you would have told me that TCU would have played for a national championship last year, I would never believe you, let alone be undefeated through the regular season. And I think what's really interesting is the fact that the Big 12 championship game the last 3 seasons, it's been all 6 different teams have played in that championship game, not just Oklahoma. And I think what's also interesting is, like, you mentioned how any team can win on any given Saturday, Thursday, etc. We saw that with Texas last year. If you would have told me they were going to beat Oklahoma 49-0, I would have been like, are you okay? And I think what's also interesting is when you look at the previous 10 seasons in the American, if you were the best team in the American going into the season, more often than not, you were going to win it. But in a Power 5 conference, how many times, Neil, have we seen a team who is picked to finish, 7th, end up winning the conference? So you feel like there's that chance. And I'll tell you this much. I want to hear from you. Like, do you see, like, do you agree with that? Because, like, I feel like now being in the Power 5, you feel like it doesn't matter where you're projected to finish. You have a chance. Do you get that sentiment?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, that was something we heard a lot of at Big 12 Media Days. And one coach in particularly that really spoke on that topic was West Virginia's coach, Neil Brown. And Neil was very upset that they were projected to finish 14th, but he knew that this team has a lot of hope. That West Virginia, they know what they're capable of doing, and they're ready to prepare to shock all the media wrong. But he also gave a little shout out to all the people in the past and said the Big 12 media hasn't been very, very accurate in their preseason polls as of last year. I mean, we talk about the parity. You have the last 2 or 3 seasons, you have these teams projected to finish 6th or 7th in the preseason poll, and then they make their way to the top and they're playing for a conference championship come December. So, I mean, it's a deep league. Everybody knows that. But it's also going to be a really exciting time now that you're playing with 14 teams for this one season with Texas and Oklahoma before they depart next season. It's going to be a fun time. I'm telling you guys right now, I don't think there's going to be any team in this league that is a guaranteed, quote-unquote, cakewalk within the Big 12.
How about that? So the Bearcats were picked to finish 13th. Is that too low for the Cincinnati Bearcats? Plus, the benefits of Evan Prater moving to wide receiver. It sounds like a great move. We'll tell you exactly how great of a move it is for the Cincinnati Bearcats next on Locked On Bearcats. Today's episode of Locked On Bearcats is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. You know, these days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available, and that's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs, because LinkedIn Jobs are going to help you find the right people for your team faster and for free. I've got a lot of experience on LinkedIn Jobs. That's how I built a staff at Bearcats Media at the University of Cincinnati. I added who we were looking for, the purple hashtag hiring frame, to our LinkedIn profile to spread the word that we were hiring for broadcasters, writers, reporters, you name it. It's simple tools like screening questions that make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experiences so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. And you got to add that right team member, right? There's that quote unquote, the right team member that has a positive and measurable impact on your business. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions do apply. Thank you for making Locked On Bearcats your first listen of every day. Coming up on tomorrow's show, it is Thursday. That means we usually talk to Russ Heltman, my colleague at All Bearcats and Sports Illustrated. So hopefully we will have him on the show tomorrow as we continue our conversation surrounding Evan Prater moving to wide receiver, the Bearcats as fall camp gears up. Neil, have you heard when the first practice for fall camp is going to be?
I have not yet, no.
Interesting. I imagine it's going to be, if I had to take a guess, I'm going to say either next week or the following week.
Yeah, it's going to be soon. I know that. It's going to come quick, too.
Camp Higher Ground always has some good food for the media at lunch, so looking forward to that and looking forward to, excuse me, getting back there and catching a practice. And I'll say this, and we'll go here. So, obviously, for the Bearcats, I think the big story right now is Evan Prater moving to wide receiver. And I think this makes sense on so many levels, Neil. What to you are the benefits of him moving to wide receiver?
There's a lot of benefits. And this was a move that might have caught some people by surprise, but this was a move that was talked about for recent weeks before the announcement came out at Big 12 Media Days. And for a guy like Evan Prater, former Mr. Ohio in 2020, I mean, you just look at it. He checked marks all the boxes that you want, especially in a guy you got to have on the field. And we saw his athleticism. He's 6'3". He's almost 200 pounds. I mean, he's a freak with the ball in his hands. I mean, we've seen the athleticism, we've seen the speed. Was a dual threat quarterback, but now making that transition to a wide receiver, I mean, it's huge. This move could benefit the Bearcats in many different ways. I mean, not only do you have your dual threat quarterback in Emory Jones right now, but you also have the ability where you can use Evan Prater in many situations, whether it's on this out there in the split slot, you can move him, do a wildcat formation, jet sweeps. You can do many different things. And with a guy like Evan Prater's size and his athleticism, and especially that speed, it's going to be a huge benefit for the Bearcats this season. And I actually asked Scott Satterfield about this move down in Dallas at Big 12 Media Days. And it was a move where they said there was a shoulder injury that he had in spring that a lot of people knew about, but they wanted to utilize his athletic abilities and really find a way to get him onto the field. And, I mean, we've all saw the reactions from a lot of former players on social media. They are gassed up for this move, and they know the impact that this move could have. And they know what the ceiling is for Evan Prater at wide receiver, and the ceiling's pretty high. And especially 6'3", Coach Satterfield really complimented his hands. Emory Jones even talked about what he's been able to see from Evan Prater at that wide receiver position. He really gave a lot of great compliments down there at Big 12 Media Day from what he saw so far since Prater's made that transition. But it brings a lot of different unique options to the offense now that Evan Prater is converting to the wide receiver. I mean, yeah, your quarterback room's more than likely set between guys like Emory Jones, Brady Lichtenberg, and Brady Drogosh. And then you also have a couple walk-ons who are still in that quarterback room as well. But Evan Prater moving to wide receiver, it's huge. I say that because this is a wide receiver room that's only returning one guy from a season ago. And that was the big thing they went out to and addressed in the portal with the additions of Donovan Ollie, D. Wiggins, Sterling Burkhalter. That was huge out there for them. But now you bring in Evan Prater, who just needs to get some time. I mean, Emory Jones talked about it as well. He said he's a quarterback. He knows how to read the field. And that's a huge instinct in making this conversion, is you're having a guy who not only is one of the smartest guys on the field playing that quarterback position, but now you're moving him to the outside at the wide receiver position. You might be able to see defenses a lot of other wide receivers and other people might not be able to from his time at quarterback. So the ceiling's extremely high for Evan Prater at wide receiver.
And here's what I think about. Opposing defenses now have very little time to prepare for when they face the Bearcats for Evan Prater, a wide receiver, on their scouting report. And I think about, Neil, let's say he gets off to a sizzling start. And that's going to catch a lot of opposing teams off guard, especially defensively. It reminds me so much of what Jamar Chase did through his first 7 games as a Bengal in 2021, when opposing defenses simply had no answer for him. And I mean, opposing defenses still have no answer for him. So it's amazing to me what this move can do. And for an offense that, as you mentioned, you don't really know what you're going to have at wide receiver. You know the names, you just don't know who's going to be the standouts, who's going to crack the starting lineup. And are you saying that Evan Prater is an automatic starter? Is he, likely to be a starter? Like, where does this stand?
I would say he wouldn't be an automatic starter just from making that move. But Scott Satterfield did say he is going to make an impact at wide receiver at Big 12 Media Days. And that's just due to the athletic abilities he has. I mean, you see the tools he has at that size. I mean, 6'3", 200 pounds, 4.5 speed out there, dual threat athlete. That's not common. That's not common for a converted quarterback now to go out there. And he definitely said he was going to make an impact. But right now, I mean, he's still getting his feet wet. Might take some time to really find his role right now. I don't think we'll see him starting week 1. But once he gets comfortable at wide receiver, it's going to be a fun time to watch up there in Clifton. That's for sure.
I definitely can't wait to see it. Because when I look at him, he reminds me so much of a guy like Cole Beasley, or for Bearcats, Rashad Medeiros, because of how quick he is and how athletic he is. So, I mean, this just makes so much sense, especially, again, when you consider that you don't really know what you're going to have at wide receiver, and he can provide a jolt to the Bearcats offense. So, speaking of which, Emory Jones, I thought Scott Satterfield said something really interesting when he was on the ESPN U set on Thursday. I don't know if you saw this, Neil, because I know you were running around all day on Thursday. But what I took away from Satterfield's time on the set was when they asked him about Emory Jones, he said that he's scarred, and he likes that. Now, scarred can have a negative connotation to it. I, however, think that because of where he's been in his career, Florida and Arizona State, and the situations he had at those two schools weren't ideal. I mean, both schools were dealing with coaches who were going to be fired. Dan Mullen and then Herm Edwards. But now he comes to Cincinnati, where there's a foundation in place. There's been a successful program that has been here for the last 5 years. And you bring in a head coach like Scott Satterfield, who at his previous location, Louisville, and there were some things that he couldn't control that ultimately were the reason why he left. He wasn't fired. He left. He came to a better job. So it kind of feels like these two guys, Emory Jones and Scott Satterfield, with the scars that they've had from previous places they've been, now they come together, and maybe this is just meant to be for those two. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, you look at the situation that arose from Emory Jones' time at Florida. I mean, he was off to a hot start. He went through that bump in the road, got benched for Anthony Richardson, ended up transferring from Florida to Arizona State. But the difference is this time around, I don't know for many of the listeners who recall Emory Jones's transfer to Arizona State, he transferred at the end of the spring. So he really didn't get that much time to really go in there and get the offense down. I mean, Herm Edwards got fired 3 weeks into the season. So, I mean, that's just an overall a tough situation to get into. But then Emory Jones was actually on campus in December here, which is huge. So now not only does he get the whole spring ball to really get acclimated, he's now got the spring ball, he's got the summer ball, and he's also got fall camp. And I mean, he clearly beat out Ben Bryant for the starting job because Ben Bryant transferred to Northwestern. So if Ben Bryant didn't think Emory Jones was going to beat him out, I don't know if we would have transferred. I mean, the quarterback battle there was tough. It was tough. It was a battle start to finish. And then Ben Bryant decided to leave, which really opened the door for a guy like Emory Jones to come in here and start. I mean, also a 6-year guy, fits the mold of Scott Satterfield's offense, but it's bigger than that because Emory Jones has a great relationship with Scott Satterfield dating from his time to Louisville. And not many people know that, but they were in talks before Scott Satterfield took this job at Cincinnati. So Emory Jones might have, nobody knows, but Emory Jones might have gone to Louisville if Scott Satterfield was staying down there. But Emory's real comfortable up here. He knows what's at stake. I mean, I think right now for a guy like Emory Jones this is the start you needed. You get the opportunity to come in here. You now have that starting job in your hands. And then you come in here with the move to the Big 12. You have all the new apparel deal, just a fresh start. You get to really, Scott Satterfield's giving you the keys to your offense right now. Like, what more do you want than that, especially as a guy right now who's in his 6th year of college football?
Well, I think it's so interesting that you bring up there, Neil. And I did not know personally that Emory Jones had known Scott Satterfield since Louisville, but it makes sense that these two are now united at Cincinnati. And I just think, and look, Emory Jones, I don't know how much nationally he's known because he hasn't had a lot of success on the field. But the one thing that you can't take away from him is 5 years of college football. What is one thing that automatically gives you? And that is knowledge. He has knowledge, Neil, and he played at Florida. I mean, he played in the SEC. That has to mean something. It does to me, and I'm sure it does to you. And here's another thing, too, about Emory Jones and Evan Prater moving to wide receiver. And I want to ask you this. Does this solidify that Brady Drogosh is going to be the starter in 2024?
I don't know. I wish I had an answer to that,
Really?
but I'm not even sure about that one.
Wow.
Because Brady Drogosh is up to, for many people who have followed along, we did have an update on Brady Drogosh, but you still have Brady Lichtenberg right there in the realms as a sophomore who's done a lot of tremendous things since coming to Cincinnati. I mean, we see all the work he's putting in offseason. Brady Lichtenberg had a tremendous spring as well. So you can't really count out a guy like Brady Lichtenberg within that quarterback room alongside Brady Drogosh. But
Okay.
Scott Satterfield gave a lot of praise to Brady Drogosh down at media days. He said he's about 6'3", 6'4" now, and he's up to about 212 pounds. He's put on 22 pounds since being here on campus in January. And I mean, he even talked about, he goes, that's going to be a hard guy to tackle in the future. But you also got to think, it's never, the keys to the starting quarterback room is never just handed to somebody. It's not just something that's going to be handed. So I wish I had an answer on that, but right now I don't know what next season will hold, because right now the focus is on what Emory Jones is building. But then we talk about, go back a little bit on the relationship with Scott Satterfield and Emory Jones. I'm sure you've seen this on social media. So Emory Jones is actually great friends with Malik Cunningham.
I didn't know that.
And they have the same quarterback trainer together, Quincy Avery.
Yep.
Those two were in touch along the lines of when Emory went back into the portal. He was talking to Malik. Malik was giving him a lot of great advice and everything, and that's what ultimately led to Emory Jones being a Cincinnati Bearcat. It all started right there with the relationship he has with Malik Cunningham and them having the same trainer in Quincy Avery.
If he turns out anything like Malik Cunningham, this is going to be a very entertaining offense for sure. In fact, Neil, I'm sure you know this. Louisville was the only team the last 4 seasons to average 200 rushing yards and 200 passing yards in college football. It's pretty strong to say.
Yeah. And that shows what Scott Satterfield is wanting to do. And we know we've all watched his offenses over the years since he's taken this job. We've all watched a lot of great film on him. But Scott Satterfield's going to want to run the ball. And, I mean, you look at that running back room. That's the one room that stayed tight since the transfer portal, the coaching change. That running back room is returning guys like Corey Kiner, Ryan Montgomery, Miles Montgomery, Ethan Wright's back there. You have a guy like Stephen Bird. Then you bring in a highly talented prospect like Manny Covey. So it's going to be a fun time up there within the running back room as well in Clifton.
No question about it. That's a great point too, Neil. I look at that running back room, and I really want all those guys to hit their full potential, especially Corey Kiner after transferring back last year prior to 2022. Didn't really see the full Kiner we wanted to, but maybe in a new scheme, and maybe that'll also benefit a guy like Ryan Montgomery, Miles Montgomery, and then there's one other guy I'm missing. Was it Stephon Bird? I feel like, Neil. Am I right on that?
Yep, Stephon Bird. Yep,
Stephon Bird. All right. So the Bearcats expect to finish 13th in the Big 12 in the preseason media poll. I think that's too low. Neil agrees. We'll explain why next on Locked On Bearcats. All right. So Neil, it's interesting. My cousin was asking me this over the weekend about my favorite Bengals seasons, and most of my answers were seasons where you didn't expect them to be as good as they ended up being. 2021, obviously. Then there's 2009, where I did not expect them to go 10-6, win the AFC North. Marvin Lewis was named Coach of the Year, and that's a playoff game that they lost, of course, to the Jets, but I still say to this day they should have won that game. And this Bearcats team, despite being picked to finish 13th, it kind of feels like there's an underdog mentality that's being forged within this program, and that's largely attributed to the culture that's being put in place. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. The culture that's being in place right now up in Clifton, it's tremendous. I mean, we've heard a lot of guys throughout the week talk about it at Big 12 Media Days, and that culture is they want to stay there. I mean, Juwan Briggs was a guy who decided to return for his 5th year and said, I like what's being built here. When you have something great, why would you leave it? And that's a quote that really stood out to a lot of people at Big 12 Media Days, because that's a guy who probably could have been playing at the next level a year early, but decided to come back and really build one more year for the move to the Big 12 and really trust what Scott Satterfield and the culture that is being built up there in Clifton. Dante Corleone was another guy who had many schools probably calling him after a tremendous freshman season, was PFF's highest rated defender, and he decided to return too. And I mean, it's Dante, for everyone who knows Dante, he's a big kid from Cincinnati. He's loyal. He loves the city of Cincinnati. He bleeds the red and black. Everybody knows that. So Dante really didn't want to go anywhere and was really trusting the culture right here in Cincinnati. But man, the culture up there is exciting, especially heading into the Big 12. You look at the stuff that Luke Fickell built from the start of his tenure at Cincinnati when he got the job back in late 2017. Yeah, he had the first season where he went 4-8, but then in the last 5 seasons, he's gone 53-11, led this team to a New Year's Six bowl game, to the college football playoffs, and with a 53-11 record, that's 5th out of all schools within college football in the last 5 years.
Pretty good.
With a win percentage of 88.2%. Just think about that for a second.
882.
88.2% win percentage since Luke Fickell's first year at Cincinnati. So the culture is built. And you got to love what the strength and conditioning guys are doing. Coach Nico Palazzati has gotten a lot of love over Big 12 Media Days. There's a lot of players who have really given thanks to him. And just we're talking about a guy like Juwan Briggs, even with that culture. Coach Nico's came in and really stressed that in the weight room. Juwan Briggs is down from 325, which is what he played last season at. Told us at Big 12 Media Days he's sitting right at about 300 and might be playing a little bit of DN and nose tackle this year. So the culture in Cincinnati it's going to be fun. It's going to be a fun time to watch.
Excuse me. And I think, too, like, when I listen to Scott Satterfield talk, and I don't mean this in any disrespect to Luke Fickell because of what he did for the program, and as you mentioned, over the last 5 seasons. But when you listen to Satterfield talk, and I get it, there's still people who are skeptical about what he's going to ultimately accomplish at Cincinnati, but he talks with this confidence, this personality, and I'm like, this guy is someone I can get behind.
Yeah, absolutely. And Scott Satterfield, every time you hear him talk, you just become more and more impressed with what he has to say. And he really, I fully stand by this. He really gets what Cincinnati culture is being built up there in Clifton. He understands it. He really does. And I know it's still early in the process, but Bearcats fans are going to be really surprised with the product that gets put on the field later this spring or later this fall. And it's going to be a fun ride into the Big 12. I will say that.
No, it's gonna be incredible. I mean, how excited are you for that September 23rd game against Oklahoma? I mean, I was thinking about this last week. Can you imagine if Big Noon Kickoff brings their pregame show to Cincinnati for that game on September 23rd, Big 12, Neil? I mean, and just think, and I go back to something that Scott Satterfield said at the Big 12 tour when it was here in Columbus, when he talked about how he's always been impressed and admired the Cincinnati Bearcats culture, even when he was at Louisville, and now he's here. And it's the very same thing with Wes Miller. It's like these guys, Satterfield and Miller, they've never been associated with Cincinnati prior to them coming here to be the head coach of football or men's basketball, but yet it feels like that they've always known what these programs are about. And I know you sent me this. I'm going to pull this up here. So this is, for those of you watching on YouTube, this is Neil's ballot. So this was Neil's ballot. It gets cut off at the bottom, so you can't see the 14th place team. But if you look at it 1 through 13, you can easily tell who Neil picked to finish 14th in West Virginia. But then again, you never know how tough they're going to be this year. Neil, you have Cincinnati picked to finish 9th. You went Texas, Oklahoma, TCU, Kansas State, Texas Tech, Baylor, Central Florida, Kansas 1 through 8. Below Cincinnati at 9, you have Oklahoma State, Iowa State, BYU, Houston, and West Virginia. Kind of take us through your thought process there when you were filling out your ballot.
Well, yeah, so a lot of things went into consideration when I was filling out this ballot here for the preseason Big 12 rankings and the polls. So obviously Texas is the running favorite. I mean, everyone kind of saw that within the media poll, but Texas is returning Quinn Ewers alongside a projected first-round wide receiver in Xavier Worthy, but then they bring in an addition to a guy like A.D. Mitchell, who has played for Georgia the last 2 seasons, won 2 national championships, and is now heading to Texas. So that, on that offensive side of the ball, is huge. I mean, you got 2 dynamic weapons outside. Yes, they are still going to have to replace a guy like Bijan Robinson, which there's a question to that. But, I mean, you're looking at those 3 guys right there. That's a high-powered offense right there for Texas. And then you have Arch Manning sitting right behind Quinn Ewers. And then Oklahoma at 2. The reason I put Oklahoma at 2 is I think that this is the year that Dillon Gabriel makes a very big step for Oklahoma. And that is from year 1 to year 2 under Coach Brett Venables. And you mentioned that Oklahoma matchup. So that's going to be the week 4 matchup is Oklahoma versus Cincinnati. And Brett Venables actually gave a lot of praise to Cincinnati when I asked him what that addition means and how he is excited to look forward to that week 4 matchup versus the Bearcats. And the quote-unquote says, they have done a tremendous job at building a very talented roster over the seasons. Coach Satterfield is a very good, tremendous coach and knows what he is going to be doing up in Cincinnati. So Scott Satterfield's drawn a lot of attention from a guy like Brett Venables, who has coached under guys like Dabo Sweeney, is now at the head of the realm at Oklahoma. But then you look down at the other rosters. TCU at 3 for me was kind of the no-brainer. In my opinion, they're coming off a national championship route. Kansas State lost literally a guy in Deuce Vaughn who put up 1,600 all-purpose yards a season ago. Texas Tech is going to be a team that really surprises a lot of people. Same with Baylor. But then UCF has a high-powered offense as well. They hired a new offensive coordinator, and they're really looking to spread the field and get that ball open. I know they finished in I believe it was 8th or 9th in the American last season in passing yards per game. John Rice Plumlee is going to take that next step. I personally believe that. And then Kansas, the certainty around Kansas at 8 is, does Jalen Daniels stay healthy? Obviously, he missed some time with the shoulder injury last year that he suffered in week 8, and Kansas was on top. Kansas was going to be making a run before the injury, and we all know that. But Kansas is returning Jalen Daniels. He was voted the preseason offensive player of the year. And then I went Cincinnati there because this Cincinnati team, I don't understand the voting at 13. I mean, I understand they're only returning one guy on the offensive side of the ball, really, and that's that running back position and one offensive lineman, so 2 guys on that offensive side of the ball there. But Cincinnati's going to surprise a lot of people. I mean, and their defense is going to be the key part to that, especially a Brian Brown defense. It's a lot of the players seem to be pretty happy and excited for what's being built. I know Dante and Jawan were both pretty excited about the defense. Jawan actually told us it's about a 180 from a Mike Tressel defense. So you put that into consideration. You know what this defense is going to do, and that's going to get to the quarterback and attack, as Brian Brown's defense has done in the past. Oklahoma State's at 10, and then Iowa State, BYU, Houston, and West Virginia round out the bottom half of that bracket.
Good stuff as always. And going back to Texas, I was thinking about this over the weekend. The one guy they lost is Bijan Robinson. And yet, Neil, he's with the Falcons. Well, who also is with the Falcons? Desmond Ridder. And I was thinking about this, and I mentioned this on the show yesterday. Like, it's great what Sauce Gardner is doing, being a former Bearcat, and at the rate he's going, he's gonna be one of the best corners, certainly of this generation, maybe of all time. But how cool is it that a Cincinnati Bearcats quarterback, formerly Desmond Ridder, can now lead a team to the playoffs potentially, and he has a running back in Robinson, who I think is a great fit in Atlanta. So it's gonna be really cool to watch those 2 guys on the Atlanta Falcons, Neil, in particular Desmond Ridder, lead an NFL team to the playoffs. Do you see Desmond Ridder being able to do that in year 2 as a starter?
Yeah, I firmly believe that. And I actually had a fantasy draft yesterday where we were talking about this, and Desmond Ridder is the only quarterback in NFL history to complete 100 passes without throwing an interception. Desmond Ridder still hasn't thrown an interception yet in his NFL career. However, he is taking that leap to now he has the keys to the Atlanta Falcons offense. And then you bring in a highly touted prospect in Bijan Robinson, but then you look on his outsides on the wide receiver room, you have a tremendous athlete in Drake London. You have a generational talent in Kyle Pitts if he stays healthy. And you look at that, those are 3 dynamic weapons right there on offense. The run game is going to be there for Atlanta. It's going to be there. And them drafting a guy like Bijan Robinson can kind of allow them to do a lot of different things with a guy like Cordell Patterson, who was a guy who really took off last year for the Falcons. So I think the sky's the limits down there in Atlanta for Dez. And it's going to be a very fun time to watch. I mean, we all saw what he was capable of doing at Cincinnati. He's like the 3rd, if I remember right, 3rd most winning quarterback in all of college basketball or college football.
Yes.
Yeah, he has the leadership skills. He has the drive. Everything about him says winner, and we've seen that. So it's going to be a very exciting time down there in Atlanta. And I do personally think Atlanta could sneak into the playoffs this season with Desmond Ridder at the helm of that offense.
It's going to be exciting. It's going to be very exciting. I mean, this is a great time of year. I mean, we're just over 6 weeks away from the start of football season for the Bearcats. NFL training camp gets underway next week. Next week, Wednesday, the Bengals' first training camp practice. Teams reporting this week. The Reds are in the thick of the pennant race in the National League Central, National League. So a lot happening. Of course, FC Cincinnati still sits atop the MLS standings, so that's great. They're getting ready for the Leagues Cup, which starts this weekend. So a lot happening throughout the city of Cincinnati. Neil Meyer of the Front Office News joining me today on Locked On Bearcats. You can follow him at Meyer Neal 6. I'm on Twitter at Frankie_Natty with 2 N's and an ATI. Instagram, AlexFrank9_, and then email alex3frank@gmail.com. Neil, it's always great to have you on. I was going to say, you're doing a fantasy draft, and it's the middle of July.
Yeah, so we did a dynasty draft
the
other day. So basically, it's a keeper league. We did a restart. So a lot of preparation went into it, but it was a pretty fun time.
Yeah, how about that? Check Neil's work out at the Front Office News. And Neil, is that right? Where can our fans see your work over at TFON?
Yeah, guys. So you continue to check us out over at thefrontofficenews.com. You can follow myself on Twitter at MeyerNeal6. You can also follow Editor-in-Chief JT Smith over on Twitter at JT_Smith on Twitter as well. Really check out our YouTube channel, The Front Office News. We're trying to get up to 1,000 subscribers. Right now, we're sitting at about 400.
Nice.
So we really appreciate if people hit that YouTube link and hit that subscribe button. But really just make sure to check us all out on those platforms there. We definitely appreciate all the support we can get.
That's always good stuff. Always good stuff. Of course, for you loyal listeners, Locked On Bearcats, don't forget, after you make Locked On Bearcats your first listen every day, don't forget to check out my good friends over at Locked On Bengals, James Rapine, who's the founder of all Bearcats, with yours truly and my colleague. I didn't found it. James founded it with, but yours truly and my colleague Russ Heltman. We are proud to work with James at all Bearcats. James Rapine and Jake Lisco are from Locked On Bengals. They are knee-deep getting ready for training camp. And, of course, the Bengals Ring of Honor is going to be announced this week. Neil, do you have a guess as to who's going to get in the Bengals Ring of Honor this year?
I do not. It's going to be interesting, though. Hopefully they get some guys. There's a lot of guys who definitely deserve that spot in the Ring of Honor. But if I had to guess right now, I don't know if I could put it together.
Interesting. I agree with you on that sentiment. I feel like there's a lot of candidates that could get in this year. I mean, I'm personally going to say Boomer and Chad. I think they are the two most popular picks right now. But I can't rule out a guy like Dave Lapham. I can't rule out a guy like Tim Crumry. Chris Collinsworth eventually is going to get in there. AJ Green's going to get in there. It wouldn't shock me, Neil, if former Cincinnati Bearcat Kevin Huber got in there eventually.
Yeah, and Kevin Huber, after the career he had, he just announced his retirement.
Yes.
Would not be surprised if they found a way to honor him here shortly. I mean, don't think they would honor him with a Ring of Honor vote this year just because you have guys, like you mentioned, Dave Lapham, Chad Johnson, AJ Green, Boomer Esiason. But Kevin Huber definitely will find his way into the Ring of Honor with the Cincinnati Bengals at one point here soon.
No question about that. Hopefully he's also the ruler of the jungle for a home game this season. Of course, Locked On Bengals. James also is the founder of All Bengals. That's a tremendous, tremendous website. Cincinnati Bengals Talk on YouTube. And you can also check out my good friend Jeff Carr, former colleague of mine at iHeartMedia Cincinnati, now with the Locked On podcast network. We're colleagues. You can follow him and Stephen Offenbaker on Locked On Reds as they continue to cover the Reds, your team, every day through the pennant race. Neil, it's always great to have you on, and we'll talk soon, okay?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you guys for having me on. This was a blast, like always.
We will see you hopefully next week, or for sure as we get to fall camp and the start of the season. Also, today, don't forget to check out Locked On Sports Today. Peter Bukowski breaks down the biggest stories in sports in 22 minutes or less with Locked On Sports Today. Coming up tomorrow on Locked On Bearcats, for you everyday listeners who make us your first listen every day, we are hoping to have my colleague at All Bearcats and Sports Illustrated, Russ Heltman, who is, I believe, back from his European sabbatical, as he will join me to continue this conversation on Evan Prater, Big 12 Media Days, and so much more. Thanks for making Locked On Bearcats your first listen of every day. I'm Alex Frank alongside Neil Meyer for Locked On Bearcats. We will talk to you tomorrow right here on Locked On Bearcats, which is, of course, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And here is today's ending clip. I have to play that at the end. That's going to do it for us today on Locked On Bearcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.